Hello and welcome back to Rehydrate. This season, we watched and will be discussing Netflix's TV adaptation of Liu Cixin's Three-Body Problem. This is Season 9, Episode 3, The Stars Our Destination, covering Episodes 6, 7, and 8. The hosts have all read the series and now have watched the entire series. My name is Dan. I've done all that, plus I've watched the Chinese three-body 30-episode epic.
My name is Talia, and have rewatched in order to do this episode, but have watched all the way through as a casual audience member as well.
My name is Priya, and I have rewatched some parts of the recent episodes that we are discussing in this episode, and I have read all of the books and watched a few episodes of the Chinese series as well.
A quick note about this episode and the show is that it will contain full spoilers for not only the entirety of the Three-Body Problem TV show, but the entirety of the book series. So if you've not read the books or you've not watched the show, be warned that we will be talking about spoilers in the entirety for the show, Three-Body Problem, Death's End, and The Dark Forest. Okay, well, the couple items for follow-up. I was, doing a bunch of reading on the kind of performance of the show. Interested to see if it gets renewed. An interesting tidbit I found is that both the Three-Body Problem and Silent Spring are both number one on Amazon after Netflix. Three-Body Problem I would guess, but Silent Spring is kind of surprising that people would.
Cool!
A bunch of people bought that, so it's interesting. And Three-Body Problem itself is on the New York Times bestseller list again. I think it was number 5 when I looked yesterday. So, yeah, it's great. Like people saw the show and are interested in getting the more details from the book. I guess we can get into it later, but like reading. Short story is the book is worth reading, even though the show is great. The book is still worth reading. Unfortunately, it seems like the Three-Body TV show is down to number 3 on Netflix as of today. It was behind the true crime thing and some Korean horror or something, and it's still not renewed. But Netflix put it up for Emmy consideration for best drama and put Jess Hong up for best actress, and then a bunch of the cast for supporting actors and actresses. And it was globally number 1 TV series on Netflix for 2 weeks in a row now. So Netflix, just renew it already, and hopefully renew it for multiple seasons. My hope is that they just say, hey, you're going to get 2 or 3 more seasons. We're going to finish the story. Because like Netflix has like this reputation of like just canceling shows like in the middle of it, never finishing their stories. And so we all know that the best parts are coming. And so we're excited to see them, and hopefully we can see it till the end. It seems kind of crazy that they would cancel it, but weird things have happened.
Maybe I should add to my host intro that I have watched and clung on to shows as they've been bounced around and canceled, because I am a big fan of Dan Harmon's Community, which I think began at NBC and ended up on Yahoo, which, did you know Yahoo had a TV department?
I did not.
Yes.
Yeah, I went through the Futurama kind of all over the place.
Exactly.
Like, The Expanse also had the same kind of problem. Where it kind of got bounced around. I mean, hopefully it doesn't happen with this show. I mean, Dan and Dave have like a deal with Netflix, right? Like a development deal. So I don't even know like if they could go anywhere else with it if they wanted to. I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't happen. They just renew it because it's awesome.
Hopefully it just gets renewed. Yeah, this is a fun series. We did 3 episodes for this podcast, so we have a lot to say.
Yeah, hopefully they renew it and they give them the green light to not release them all at the same time. So like I think that was I think if they had released it like maybe 2 episodes a week or 1 episode a week, like it would have had like a very much longer life, and people would like been I don't know. I think having all the episodes come at the same time did it a disservice, especially this kind of show where it's like super dense and they have all these like big kind of moments in there. I think it would have been better served to kind of meet it out over the weeks. However they do it, hopefully they let it kind of give a chance for people to watch it, not just binge it. But whatever, green light it first, and then we'll deal with that later.
Yeah, a few shows that Netflix had recently released, at the very least, what they can do is release like half of the season and then do like a month and a half's pause or 2 months pause and then release the other half. Although I don't love when they do that. they did do that with other shows recently. So I guess that also contributes to the longevity of the show. So that's
Yeah,
another thing
can you
they
imagine
might
if
do.
they like released like episodes like 1, 2, and 3 or something, and then they released the rest of them, even split it that way, it would have been great, right? People would have been like on the edge of their seats after episode 3, and then yeah, I know. But what do I know? But speaking of these episodes, I think let's get into the summary. There's, we have 3 of them going, episodes 6, 7, and 8 that ends the season here. There's a lot of stuff to go over, so apologies in advance for the long summaries, but we want to make sure we're hitting all the very important parts of all these episodes. So Priya is going to go over episode 6 first.
In episode 6, the world reacts with riots and suicides to the revelation of the Santee, while governments try to raise money for the coming war effort by introducing a program called The Stars Our Destination. Wade plans the defense of Earth at Witchwood Manor and recruits Jin, asking her to come up with a proposal. The only requirement is acceleration up to 1% of light speed using current tech. She proposes using nuclear pulse propulsion to incrementally accelerate a small probe with each explosion. Raj speaks to Wade and asks him to join the space fleet, and Wade agrees. They're going to assemble spacefaring ships on the moon. Jin visits Will on the beach and tells him that she knows that he has cancer. Jin folds 2 origami boats and they watch them sail off into the water. Saul and Will speak about Jin. Will is hesitant to say anything to Jin and ruin their friendship, but Saul and Augie convince him to go to London to tell her how he feels about her. But after seeing Jin and Raj together back in London, he decides against it. Will tells Augie, who's been racked with guilt over her role in Panama, that Jin really needs her help. Despite her feelings about Wade, Augie agrees to help. Ye tells Dasha that the real reason that Vera committed suicide is because she found out the truth about her mother's role in contacting the Santee. Dasha gets approval to release Ye from custody. Jin tells Wade that the probe doesn't have any way to decelerate long enough to be intercepted by the Santee, but Wade reveals that the probe is going to be tempting enough for them to go out of their way to capture it because they're sending a human being on it. Ye Wenjie returns home and prays to her lord, revealing that she knows they're coming to stamp humans out, but she tells them that she still has an idea, and that when they get here, there might be a fair fight or no fight at all. Back on the beach, Will sees a vision of the boats and visits the Stars Our Destination. He tells them that he wants to buy a star.
In episode 7, Will points out DX3906 to Saul, saying it's 401.5 light years away. Will demands that Saul never tells her that he bought the star for her. Shortly after, Will passes out. Raj brings in a gift of a plaque that Jin has been given of the star DX3906 from an anonymous person, but he dismisses it, saying no one can own a star. Wade gets a demonstration of the hybridation technology. The test subject has been hibernating for a month and has been brought back with only minimal side effects. He tells Jin that he intends to hibernate and wake up for a week a year until the Santee arrives, since no one else can be trusted to run the plan. Wade tells Jin that he can only get 300 bombs, so they need to reduce the size of the payload. Wade says that they will only be sending a brain. Augie open sources her work for all the world to be able to use. Jin visits Will in the hospital and talks about the Starcase program. Will shows Jin the book of fairy tales that she gave him in 2015. Jin tries to tell Will not to volunteer for the project. Will realizes that she doesn't have any options and tells her that it's going to be all right. After looking at books on game theory and the Fermi paradox, Ye and Saul speak in the graveyard. Ye tells Saul a cryptic joke about Einstein trying to play music with God in heaven, but he gets his violin destroyed and the angels tell him that you should never play with God. She says that humor is a very personal thing and some jokes only make sense to 2 people, and that we wouldn't survive without them. She adds that she hopes that the joke won't cause him any trouble. Will refuses to sign a pledge of allegiance to humanity, passing Wade's test and cementing him as the perfect candidate. Sofan contacts Tatiana and tells her that she is needed for their cause. Saul and Will talk about the possibility of what might happen if the probe is captured. Saul brings up the possibility that they will bring him back just to torture him to get information that will help them conquer the human race. Will is undeterred and goes through with his decision. After Wade tells Jin that Will bought her the star, she runs back to the hospital, but it's too late, as they've already conducted the procedure to remove his brain. At Red Coast Base, Yes slips her bodyguard and contemplates jumping from the cliff. Tatiana meets her there. Knowing that she is there to kill her, Ye asks if they can watch a final sunset together.
In episode 8, Saul, who just had a one-night stand with a woman, waits for a ride with her. Suddenly, a car veers off the road in what appears to be an accident, resulting in her death, as Saul, who has tripped, looks on. Dasha tells Saul that he believes that this was an attempt on his life. Ye Wenjie was murdered in China, and he was the last person she spoke with before she left for China. Dasha then gives Saul bulletproof clothes and brings him to a private jet, escorted by fighter jets. Wade refuses Jin's request to include seeds in the capsule, saying that any weight will slow down the capsule and delay intercepting the enemy fleet. Saul's flight lands at the UN building. At the Planetary Defense Council, Secretary General Joseph gives a speech about a new program called the Wallfacer Project, in which 3 people will be named Wallfacers and will have wide latitude to do whatever they want to develop a plan in secret to defeat the Santi. After 2 more conventional choices, Saul is surprised to be named the 3rd Wallfacer. Sec Joseph says that the enemy knows why Saul was chosen. Saul tells her that he rejects the position, to which she says he is free to do anything. Saul is shot in the chest by a sniper shortly after demanding Dasha and Kent allow him to leave alone. Raj asks Jin if she loved Will. She corrects him and says that she loves him and that he is still alive. Saul asks Dasha to meet his would-be assassin, and when Saul asks why he did it, he says that he got to be a soldier in the army of the Lord. The Secretary General expresses that they only have an indirect reason for why Saul was chosen, but she believes that he will know when the time is right. Will's brain is loaded into the rocket, and Wade tells Jin that he included the seeds in the capsule after all. Saul arrives, and he and Jin take a walk on the beach where they try to understand why he was chosen as Wallfacer. Augie, in Mexico, is installing water filters that use her nanofibers to provide clean drinking water. While demonstrating them, she ignores a call from Saul. The Starcase project's rocket makes it to the first set of bombs and successfully harnesses the power of nuclear explosion to increase speed. However, after the 3rd bomb, one of the supports on the sail malfunctions, and the capsule veers off course, lost forever to space. Wade returns back aboard his private jet when Sofon takes over his screen, and then appears in front of him. She says that there will be a place for him when they arrive and that he is part of their plan. He sees a hallucination of Sofon, the countdown, and a vision of himself without eyes. Dasha takes Jin and Saul for a drive out to a swamp swarming with bugs. He points out that humans have been trying to get rid of bugs forever, but they're still here, no matter what we do to them. He pours out a drink for the bugs and says they have work to do. And I can take us through the characters. They're mostly repeats, but there's a few new ones. So we have Secretary General Joseph, which is Secretary General Say, Thomas Wade, Jin Chung, Raj Varma, Augie Salazar, Will Downing, Saul Durand, Dasha, Regjie, which is Shi Xiaoming, or Dasha's son, Ye Wenjie, Dr. Dimitrov, Roxanne, who is Will Downing's sister, Dennis Porlock, Tatiana Haas, Nora, Saul's one-night stand, Sebastian Kent, the day-to-day liaison, and Dr. Ho Bolin, a Wallfacer who's a military historian, and Professor Layla Erich, another Wallfacer who fought ISIS in asymmetric warfare.
All right, thank you very much. Those long summaries, but a lot to go over. I think let's, as we do, go over general impressions. I think, Priya, this time your turn to go first.
Well, that was, I think, a great final 3 episodes. I think that, as we can tell from our summaries being so long for these, there was a lot that happened, a lot that they packed into it. One of my biggest questions, like going into this, is how much they're going to cover, because book 1 can get a little bit tedious, as we've long discussed. Although it's still very much readable. It still keeps you hooked, but I was hoping to see at least a little bit of elements of book 2 incorporated into the season, and they very much were. So the way that I saw this is that it's all of book 1 and maybe like a quarter of book 2 or less, maybe 1/5. So I really appreciated that. And I had a few favorite scenes, like the scene where Wenjie has the conversation with Saul is definitely a favorite, although the joke is very cryptic, and I think it has the intended effect. I another one of my favorite scenes, and I'm a sucker for scenes like this, is the scene that Will Downing has in the hospital, his final conversation with Jin before he has that before or after, now I can't remember, before he talks to Wade. I think it's right before, where he confesses finally in the end that he loves her, and it's just all the scenes with him just really tugged at my heartstrings. I think that he's a phenomenal actor, and I think that he was the emotional anchoring point of the season. I know that Talia might disagree with me, or I'm curious to see if you still disagree with me on that. Yeah, I think that there was a lot of heart and emotion to these final 3. And I think overall, it wrapped up really nicely. And I think it created enough intrigue at the end for people who haven't read the books to maybe feel compelled to read them if they don't want to wait, God knows how long until season 2 comes out, and really wants to know what becomes of the Wallfacer project. Well, there are the books.
I think I can go next. So yeah, I agree. About Will specifically. I think a lot of sentiment I saw online was that, oh, the show is good until episode 5 and then it kind of falls off, gets too slow. But I would wholeheartedly disagree. Like I think 6, 7, and 8 were the best of the show, and maybe that's my bias as a book reader, because like I'm just like so more interested in those books than the first book. Like Priya said, like the book 1 is good, but it's really just like a setup to get to the really, really good stuff that happens in 2 and 3. I was afraid you're going to take my favorite scene of the of the show. So it's similar to yours, but the scene where Will actually goes to the Stars Are Destination building and buys the star was my favorite of the whole show. Like him like watching like the video presentation and like
Yes.
it's so good.
That was on my list too, though I didn't mention it. That was another favorite of mine as well.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, and I think the joke in general was like another one of my favorite scenes, just because like it's so critical to the entirety of the rest of the show, and like I think they did it in a smart way to not just like lay it out like the way the even the way Wenjie does it in the books is kind of cryptic, and we'll get into a little bit later. But here, like if making it even more cryptic and have something for people to talk about, I think it was smart. Yeah. So I mean, overall, love the series. Really hope it gets renewed. It exceeded my expectations far and away from what I thought it was going to be. It's very disappointing to see people online, kind of nitpick it and be like, "Oh, the books are better," or "The 10-cent version is better." The 10-cent version is not better. Like, I watched it. It's fine. It's a 1-to-1 adaptation of the first book, but you don't need
definitively not better.
Yeah, you don't need a 1-to-1 adaptation of the first book, and like, there's a lot of like weird like added stuff. Not to say it's bad, because it's good. Like I would recommend watching both of them, but like if you're gonna watch one of them, the Netflix one is like far superior, and like I think it's even superior to the books in some aspects, right? And so yeah, like highly recommend. Love these last 3 episodes. How about you, Talia?
Strongly agree. Just as evidenced by the fact that all of us have standout favorite scenes, best scenes from the entire arc, and they all happen in the last 3 episodes. I don't think I share any of those with you for your favorites, but I had like half a dozen scenes that I enjoyed so much that I like look forward to them in the rewatch. I do think that the internet is always a place for nitpicking, and of course, I feel the instinct and the urge to point out when things are not being executed perfectly, but it really would do a disservice to what the creators have pulled off. Like, this is a great adaptation. It is a Western adaptation. Like, yes, some things will have subtitles and some things will have English accents. Get over it. I don't know. Like, this is a Western adaptation, and those are fairly small liberties to take to completely switch medium, you know? Yeah, I think my main issues would be that I feel like we're getting the wrong idea of the aliens. I don't think that they're being presented quite as they were presented in the book. They seem a little too all powerful in the wrong ways, and we can get into a little bit of that later. But I thought that there were so many fantastic scenes. Do you want me to go through all of mine, or do you want to just do general impressions?
Go for it.
Okay, so first off, that probe with like the sail unfolding in space, so cool, unbelievably cool. Like the way it was rendered, the way that everyone is watching with so much hope and trepidation. Seeing this nanotechnology used in this way, I'm with Dan, 100% agree. It was better than the book, right? Like, of course, they should have linked Wang Miao's nanotech story to a hyper light material that needs to go on the Staircase project. It's silly that they didn't in the book. It makes a ton of sense.
I thought they did.
Not like explicitly with Wang Miao.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, but I thought they mentioned like nanomaterial, and so like you just kind of put it together.
Yeah, it's just like it's such an opportunity to breathe life into a dead storyline.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought it was, but that's not even why I appreciated it so much. I just thought it looked really cool and gave me, as a human who can't travel relativistic to light speed, hope. The transportation of Saul to New York, like when he's landing at the UN, having those duplicate cars and the fighter jets surrounding them really give you a sense that Luoji has in the book of like, whoa, like what's happening? This seems very serious. Like 1 second I'm tripping over my own feet, and now I'm being put on a first class like private jet to an unknown location, and there's this like severity and sense of scale that as a casual professor of sociology you wouldn't be accustomed to. So having pulled off that tone change was really well done. And then there was like a little bit of humor. Thank goodness, we've been missing it. These books are fantastic. There are a few moments where they're funny, not always on purpose. Looking at you, like death attempts during Dasha and Luoji after his reawakening. But like Wade batting around Raj like a cat toy. Who comes to see him, his first words are, "You got 3 minutes." He does this little window request. There's this funny would-be power struggle, and Wade's only response to that is 2 minutes. Yeah, just very funny scenes. And some honorable mentions, because I think Priya maybe added some. I know there's a lot of Will Downing love in in our rewatch.
I totally agree with you on the humor aspect, because like I feel like the entire weight of all the humor is carried by Dasha and a little bit by Luoji in the books, whereas you get a lot more like, I don't know, like humor from other characters in this. Like I found it so funny. You just reminded me of another scene with Wade that I found hilarious, which was that I think shortly after the opening scene of episode 6.
Is it Edgar volunteering to put his brain?
Oh, that was hilarious. Yeah,
You'll notice Edgar does not make our character list.
Dropped a hard R on him. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, the girl who died within moments, whereas Edgar was actually in several scenes. My gosh, poor Edgar. No, it was the scene before where you have all this horrible stuff happening. Like, the scene right before was I think people having hung themselves on the lampposts, and the next scene is like Wade setting up setting up his whole workstation at the manor, and he's like, while everyone else is doing all this crazy stuff out there, we're gonna set up camp here and figure shit out. And I remember me and Sid just like laughed at his tone with that, because he was like all business and like he doesn't give a crap about what's going on with like the different factions are breaking off, like even though they're not specifically referred to by factions, you can see in the different reactions to the conflict that people are demonstrating these different modes of thinking about the conflict. So
yeah. Wade would do many, many things, but he would never hang himself because physics is over.
Right.
I think another funny moment was like in the very beginning of episode 7, like when Will was telling Saul about where his star is, and he was like, yeah, it's not there. And like he's like, what? Did I get the parallax wrong? He's like, I don't know. It's just messing with you.
It's exactly what your like stoned friend would do to you. Yeah, 100%. Like, great. Bro, I don't know where DX3906 DX3905. Absolutely. And also not like funny haha, but this show does, I know it's a 2024 production, but it still like kind of comes on the heels of the pandemic. Like, we all remember what it's like to see empty shelves and just have this feeling of uneasiness. And when Will and Saul are trying to buy alcohol, I only noticed this on the rewatch. There's like some lingering panning camera work on these empty shelves, and they're mumbling about people hoarding digestive biscuits. And of course, the point that comes up a couple of times is that it's really hard to find alcohol, like, which in England is a national crisis. I think Jin manages to find alcohol and, a fish in a fishbowl all at the same time, and it comes bearing gifts. So, it's kind of interesting to see. It's not explicitly named. I know, especially in the third book, the author spends a lot of time just directly explaining to the audience through Chengxin's diaries how humanity is reacting and why there's like waxing and waning religiosity. I doubt we'll get that in this adaptation, but we still see signs of it, still see the fingerprints.
Speaking of empty shelves, I can't not mention on Friday, New York City, and by default, everything around New York City experienced an earthquake. I don't know if you guys heard about this, but we had a pretty ridiculous occurrence. I have never experienced an earthquake in my life before until that day. It was very scary.
I did, because I went to school in Southern California, but as a New Yorker, absolutely not. Never expected it.
No, never expected. And that too, it was 2 days before an eclipse. So make of that what you will. But Reddit had a great time with that. The Long Island Reddit someone commented on the earthquake thread, I'm going to the grocery store and buying milk and eggs. And someone was like, everyone quick, get to the store and execute the French toast disaster preparation method. So that's what it is for us in Long Island. I guess in England, it's booze. But like, I guess
long dark history of that.
Yep. Yes, this is what happens when any natural disaster strikes. So I can just imagine when this existential crisis strikes, the amount of raiding of the grocery stores and the delis and the bodegas there would be.
So I am still the voice of opposition, I guess, to Will Downing. I know that my co-hosts are both a big fan of how that character was adapted, but even though it's not my favorite and I wish they'd kept him, or at least not wish, but I found the story a lot more moving with him like pathetic and with nothing to live for, because it gives this huge delta that he's able to overcome. But I did like Will and Saul in his hospital room, and him saying like, well, how often do people get a chance like this, like to say goodbye to a best friend? Euthanasia is very rare and very uncommon in the world that we live in today. So it is a form of like communication that humanity doesn't really have and we're not really used to. And I think it's interesting that we're about to have a power structure in humanity that we don't have and aren't used to, because the power of the Wallfacers and the power of the upcoming Swordholder are both really, really new in in human history. So it's sort of interesting to see that. So that was an honorable mention for my best scenes.
I would like to take a moment and express why I think that the portrayal of Will as someone who's well loved versus Yun Tianming as someone who is kind of pathetic and no one really cares about. I want to I think the reason I feel so adamant about why it works so well is because when you watch him in the season, and his character and how it unfolds and how well loved he is by the characters around him and how lovable he is in general, you want to see that character return and you hold on to hope for that. Whereas I felt, and I can't remember if in the books, was I really, really hoping that I will see Yen Tianming again? I was curious for the sake of the narrative, but not for the sake of the character, if that makes sense. Like I wanted to see that storyline come to fruition, but I wasn't attached to the character. And so if they hadn't given me that in the end, I wouldn't have been like distraught over it. But now having seen the character of Will,
you're like, if he doesn't get picked up by the Santi,
hadn't read the books and didn't know that we will see him again, I would be kind of distraught if I didn't see him again. So I think that it creates that intrigue that will pay off really well once we do get to the part in the story where he comes where he gets to tell his stories.
I fully expect to be in the minority about this forever. So that's just where I stand. I relate to him a lot more as someone who's desperate, clinging to the margins of society, feels like he can't fit in. It's really no sacrifice for him to not pledge allegiance to humanity because he feels so outside of it. And it means that he takes such a big risk. Like he's not telling a story to his true love. He's telling a story to a woman that he has adored, who he barely knows. He's taking a huge risk because they never had the kind of intimacy that he's alluding to. And I just think it's better and stronger, but whatever, I'm going to be labeled a hater and I fully expect to remain in the minority camp forever. But I like how much you guys are involved.
I think like for me personally, like I think like the story is way more impactful how it's told in here. And like I remember when I was reading the book, when I got to book 3 and I started reading the Yun Ming stuff, and I was like, man, another one? Like, because like Wang Miao is also sort of like a kind of like nerdy loser who's like weirdly stalking Young Dong and like taking pictures of her secretly and has some weird obsession with her. And then like Wenjie is like in the beginning is like also sort of, he's not a loser, he's like, but just like sort of like a nerdy guy, but he's also sort of a player. I don't know. It's like, it's not exactly the same character, but it was like, and obviously like they grow up to be something much different, but like Yun Ming is like, oh, it's like another nerdy guy who just has a crush on a girl he sees from afar, right? And so like, I just even forgot about him after the Starcase project. Like I was like, all right, well, I guess that probe's going 1% of light speed. That was like,
you were supposed to. That's the whole point.
yeah. I mean, like I just forgot about him. Maybe like, and then when the So Fong comes back and says, oh, Yun Ming wants to talk to you, and it's like, whoa, like, I remember that guy. And then like
that was like a moment I put the book down when she says Yun Tianming would like to speak to you. Like I fully put the book down and stood up and like did a little free check-in.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I would have thrown the book out the window though if I had actually cared about Yun Tianming. And then she said, "I will die on this hill."
It was like the Trisolarans have achieved light speed. That was a mic drop moment, and so was Yun Tianming would like to speak to you. Those were 2 mic drop moments from Death's End. The first 2 books don't have any.
I mean, I hope that like, well, I don't know about that, but like, what about the droplet attack? That's not a mic drop moment, but
it's like 10 minutes long. What sentence encapsulates that?
Ding Yi saying, stupid children run. Like when you realize like, oh, this is not going to go well for us.
Nah, absolutely not. Whatever. I can stay in the minority. Yeah. The podcast. It's actually, if you're like a new listener, the hosts actually have a long history of not agreeing on anything. So this recent agreement that we've fallen into, that's the aberration. We usually are.
It all comes from
a place of nothing for you, Talia? Did it do nothing for you? His British accent and his soft voice and his like heartfelt
As someone who grew up in the
character.
UK, no, I know a lot of soft English guys. That itself does not do it for me.
This poor man withering away.
I think like his relationship with Saul, like being like so like
Totally.
like growing like over the episodes, like I think Saul, like I think we're supposed to think that like Jack and Will are best friends, but like Saul and Will seem to have like even better friendship than that. Like Jack's just sort of like a jerk, you know, who like just like
He's a
cares
better
about him.
friend to him than who when. Like that
Yeah.
character was
Well, yeah.
expanded pretty wildly. No, I'm totally with you though. I do like how often we see them together and bonding. I would agree with that. Will and Saul is like a strong choice.
But then like I think like even like you know her Jin and the talking to him like the actress is playing her is great and like the conversation they have
She
like
is
right
great.
before like where he gives her permission to like he knows that she wants to do it and then he gives her permission it's great and like so you just feel for those two and then her reaction later on like on the plane saying like when Raj is like being a jerk to her saying like so you loved him, she's like I love him, and it's like like it's not just because of the star, like it's because like she actually loves him. Like in the book Changxing just like says like, oh, this guy is really cool, he bought me a star, right? Like maybe I do like him, but like you don't really, there's not like a lot of like emotional weight behind it, but it's more like
Y'all are misreading this entire book. Absolutely not.
Oh, we're misreading.
She's in love with the fact that someone gave her a star, like
but
instead
not
of
with
a
him,
Bugatti.
not with him.
And she doesn't. Yes, and that's the point. It's like when Changxin reawakens from her hibernation and wakes up like way late in later and meets AA for the first time. I think we're already in deterrence by then. So it's almost the end of deterrence, though they don't know that. And she sees all this art made by Trisolarans. It's the same kind of love story that she admires and is drawn to, in which these lovers like never meet. And so it's like, well, are they really lovers? Like she doesn't sit and pine for him as a person, but there's still a strong current of love. And I think reducing it down to someone that you actually know and actually do love is not the same story that he was telling. Is not a worse story, but it's not the same kind of love story.
I honestly had the impression though, like when reading the books, that Lucy Shen is not the best at writing romance between characters. I think we can agree to that, right? Like there's no there's no romantic entanglements between characters. But by romantic, I just don't mean like typical romance in a book. I mean like I mean the connections between people that can be romantic at times and at other times like deep friendships and such. He does manage that at certain moments. Like I think towards the end, the experience that Cheng Xin has with the guy that she's caught with, what's his name?
Guan Yifan.
Yes. So those moments, like that conversation that they have are speak to like kind of like a deeper connection that one human has to another. And I think I get the sense that he tries very hard to do it and only sometimes hits the mark. And I think that these types of moments and these types of connections between characters are so pivotal to making you care about everything overall. And another thing that Will's character accomplishes for me, at least, is that it makes Saul's character better. The fact that there's this guy who seemingly doesn't give a shit about anything, and he's just kind of, having all these one night stands. He's just like not really living his life to the fullest extent of his own potential. But then you see him being an excellent friend. Whenever he is actually needed, he shows up. And for Will, that after Jack dies, he's kind of like a replacement, but like a better replacement for Jack. Someone who actually truly seems to care about him. And he's kind of that liaison between Will and Jin at times, where he, kind of keeps an eye on Will while Jin is off doing her own thing. So I felt like it brings the characters together in a sense. And yeah, and I honestly felt that that the way that the show portrays all of these characters as a group of friends just works way better than the isolated characters that we have throughout the books, where a lot of these characters that we're seeing smashed together in a group of friends in the show don't even appear in the same timeline in the book.
I guess the reason I'm saying it's a different kind of story is like a little bit steeped in knowledge of like Eastern stories, whether they're love stories or just like more Eastern Chinese history, because they do differ from what we think of as typical, only because we think of like the Western canon and Western literature as the typical love story. But I see really obvious key differences, and I wonder if other people who have like similar backgrounds also see them as clearly as I do, because I see like a greater emphasis on fate and destiny playing a role in bringing them together. Like that's why it matters that he goes off course and too slow. Like fate does play a central role. Fate's choice is a big part of the Remembrance of Earth's Past series. And then there's less centered characterization of the lovers, because especially in Chinese, there's this prioritization of like collectivism and familial harmony or communal harmony, so that love story can focus on the dynamic of different times, different communities, rather than solely like the lovers themselves. I think I'm more used to it between families or communities, but I see it here as like this love is bridging gaps between people from different eras. And I also see like big themes of sacrifice and duty and obligation. And that's why I appreciated when Changxin asks him in like a pretty formal way, like she's crying at his deathbed, she straightens herself up and she's like, I'm here to request that you take part in the Starcase program. And he starts laughing. He knows that like she didn't come for him, and he knows that it's his responsibility. And so he takes responsibility and accepts his duty. And then there's this longing and patience, which, yeah, we get some longing because he isn't loved back, but it feels like we don't get to actually have anything stretched out, because his whole arc has been that this girl doesn't love him back. And then as soon as his brain is sent off, we get this, yeah, I do love him. I don't think Changxin ever comes out and says it that clearly. Like she does have this yearning and longing and knows that they're separated, but she can't even place it on why she feels that way. So it feels like an Eastern love story to me. And that's all I have to say to that. It's just a Western adaptation.
I mean, so I'll agree that it's different, but I think it's better here. like I mean, like I think like the story, like to Changxin, like Yuan Tianming just some guy that she thought of, right? And so like I grabbed the quote that you were just talking about from the book. Changxin seemed to hear this inner speech. She lifted her head. It was the first time that her eyes were this close, closer than he had ever dared to dream. Her eyes made her even more beautiful by her tears, broke his heart. But when she finally spoke, what she said was not what he expected. Tianming, did you know that the euthanasia law was passed specifically for you? So it's just like she was more worried that like the guy that she needed to put on the Staircase program was going to die before they could use his brain. Not that like she loved him.
And she gets to hate herself about that later. I'm sorry. I said I would shut up. We have so much more to discuss.
Yeah. I mean, to me, like, I don't know. Like, it's way more impactful. Like,
I feel like we should do a fourth episode dissecting Yuan Tianming versus Will Downing. Like a fourth episode just on this subject.
I'll allow the subject to change. And also, I do notice that, like, as we write our plot summaries, there are things that if you're just watching and you haven't read the books, you might question, like, why we bring this up and linger, like, about us folding origami boats. But it's because it's steeped in a lot of foreshadowing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that going back to a point I made, like, last show, like, you know, people are saying like, oh, like they're changing all the things about the books or whatever. But like they have such reverence for the books, I think, and they're including all these Easter eggs that
they really do
directly referencing the books, like Jin giving him the fishbowl, There's
The Book of Fairy Tales.
Yeah, the Book of Fairy Tales. There's like quotes directly about the boats. I also grabbed another quote for that. So Yunhei Ming has a dream earlier on saying he sat on a small origami boat drifting over placid water, oarless. The sky was a misty dark gray. There was a cool drizzle, but the rain apparently did not reach the surface of the water, which remained as smooth as a mirror. The water, also gray, merged with the sky in every direction. There was no horizon, no shore, which is like directly from the books into the show. Like that's what happens. Like when his vision of him, once he goes under euthanasia, like he has that vision.
Yeah, it's even drizzly like it is on the beach. Like it's an English beach.
Right.
It's not tropical.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm sure we could talk about this, all day. But yeah, to me, like Will and Jin's story was the best part of the show, and I hope. I mean, I want to see the conclusion of it, but I hope that they have it in season 3 where they meet back up, and like Will is just not part of season 2, and people just assume that his his capsule is flying off.
I hope they have the courage to do that. I hope they have the courage to just let him fade.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be difficult for sure, but like hopefully, season 2 we can get into it, but like there's a lot of stuff they can still do in season 2, and then season 3, then Jin meets back up with Will on that thing, and it'll be 100,000 times more impactful, I think, than even like one of the greatest scenes of the book. Her meeting him on the hologram or whatever, and having those lights, and someone also pointed out like the lights that he was like using for the euthanasia kind of corresponds to like the meter on the ship. Like when it's like,
whoa,
it was like,
that's a deep cut.
Yeah, I didn't pull it. I read it somewhere.
I missed that.
I didn't think of that at all. Wow.
Yeah, but like the meter of like, oh, you're talking too much, and we're gonna blow up the ship if you keep talking.
People are so perceptive.
Yeah.
I don't know. I saw like Jordan Peele reading some fan theories of like these ardent Redditors being like, no, you idiot. The reason he's playing this violin is because he's referencing a jig, and they like have their whole theory. And he's like, huh, I never knew that. This is just what the guy was able to play. Maybe it's a deep cut. Maybe it's deeper than the director. Either way, I love that people are theorizing. I love that this is getting attention to the book, because even if I'm going to be grouchy, like the whole point is that it's introducing this story to an incredibly wide audience, which makes me really happy.
Yeah, and like I'm still active on the 3-body Reddits, and like there's a common question of like, should I read the books? I read I watched this series and I liked it, so should I read the books? Like absolutely. Anyone who's listening to this for whatever reason, if you haven't read the books, like we're in full spoiler mode. Read the books.
It's a completed series too. Like it has been written to completion. Like my biggest gripe with series, and I couldn't start Game of Thrones for that reason.
For this reason, yeah.
Yeah, because it's not finished by the author, and like we don't know if and when it will ever be finished. Whereas this gives you everything you need to know ever.
This is finished in every sense. There's no follow-up, I promise.
Like, except for a spin-off that you do not need to read.
It's not that you don't need to, you shouldn't.
You should.
Yeah, actively, yes. I should not be passive in my advice on that. Do not read.
I think, well, speaking of Will, let's talk about the Starcase project and his brain going off into space. I think Tala, you brought that up as like one of your favorite scenes. Mine too. I think they executed it really well. I mean, the differences are in the book. It like fails after like the last bomb, and it's like also like I think they actually had 1,000 bombs in there.
They managed to get 1,000, and it's somewhere in like it's almost at the end.
It was like in the 900s, right? But he was like
exactly.
Like the important thing was that he was accelerating at like near 1% of light speed, and so he can meet the Trisolarans, that much faster. Here he's going pretty slow relatively, right? It was like 70.
If he got out of 80 out of 300,
it was like 80 kilometers per second, which is fast, but not like anywhere close to light speed fast, right? So It'd be interesting to see like how they kind of reconcile that with like how the Triaslans can actually like pick him up, because like they're gonna be here in 400 years. Like at his speed, like is probably like in like the 380
Maybe it's supposed to be picked
range.
up by the second Trisolaran fleet, because if it's not, then again that comes back to my central gripe, which is that the Trisolarans are presented as just too all powerful. Like, I don't know. I didn't like that suddenly Sophon can just appear as a hologram before him. Like, I understand how it works for the plot, but it just feels too all powerful. It feels like they can make any human fully hallucinate, not see a countdown that they know isn't there. It would make them like completely gaslight any human being or every human being. Like, we don't know the extent of their power.
And I don't think that that this type of scene remains true to the characterizations of the Trisolarans in the
Exactly.
book, because I think that they wouldn't really think to do like spooky stuff, you know? Like I hated when they do like what feels like a jump scare, and I felt like that's not really what they're like. They don't seem to have the capacity even to think like that, right? Like to think to do something like that. Their whole
Of course
thing is
not. Yeah.
right. So that was my that scene might have been like my one big gripe with the show. And it carries along a chain of like gripes in that I know you've mentioned about the characterization of the Santi slash Trisolarans, which is that they're being made out to be a force that is way too physical in this world than what actually
As if it's born to this world. Yeah.
right.
And I
So
think, yeah.
so their only way of operating in the books, and I think that this is where the books excel, is that they have so much power despite having so little physical influence in our world.
It's just two protons in the books.
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of what's happening here, like we had this issue with the helmets looking like they were actually a piece of metal that the Santi gave to the humans, which would not have been possible. They could not send anything but two protons to Earth, so they wouldn't have been able to send these VR headsets to Earth. Obviously,
It's really telling that like in the book in Dark Forest we get the Trisolarans speaking to some member of ETO, probably a character that is now Tatiana, but they start speaking to him again in this depressed state, and he thinks that they've given up, and they tell him like, we need you to kill Luoji, kill Saul, having already attempted this assassination. And they say, yes, you need to kill him, but also make it look like you didn't kill him. And the ETO is like, yeah, of course. Like, yeah, we'll make it discreet. And the Trisolarans are like, wow, like to us, that is a very, very complicated plan. Like that's as deep as their scheming goes.
Yeah.
Is like, yeah, killing someone, straightforward. Got it. We have the princeps ordering him like, all right, science minister, you unfold it. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to burn you alive. Killing really straightforward, but like make it seem like it wasn't you. That is the height of scheming for the Santi. And so the idea that they would like flash an image of what will have been your fate if you go down this road and have an eyeless corpse is such human thinking. It's not alien at all. So
exactly.
I'm with you, Priya.
That is the problem with it. Exactly what you said. It's human thinking. It's not showing the differences that the book constantly makes us face, which is that this alien civilization is quite different in how they think from humans.
Which is like the hardest thing to pull off in science fiction, or not the hardest, but sorry, one of the tropes that is so tedious in science fiction is that someone prophesies an alien and then it just ends up being a really flimsy filter for like, I see, you mean the Soviets, like like an enemy that they can already conceive of and already imagine. So Liu Cixin did a better job at creating a more alien sensibility.
But
yeah.
In defense of the showrunners, I think even Liu Cixin gets like, even he can't do this perfectly, even though he does it better than a lot.
It's hard.
I think just the first interaction with the Trisolarans, I felt when the pacifist speaks to Wenjie and responds to her message for the first time, that felt like a very human thing. That you're lucky that you have gotten in touch with a pacifist. And I'm going to warn you, I am working to the detriment of my entire civilization to warn you about this. That doesn't seem like
I
that
thought
seems
that
like it.
was interesting though, because it's not a civilization, right? It's just an individual. It's
Yes,
not the
but
human civilization speaking to the Santee. It's human to human,
exactly, but they're not human, and
person to person.
they don't have the sense of individualism that humans have.
Hmm.
So for him to have acted from an individualistic
I
perspective,
thought he very clearly had an individualistic. One of his concerns is
yes,
if I tell them I'm going to lose my job. Like
right.
it's
But then the whole premise of the Trisolarans is that they have like hive mind type of thinking, and they think as a collective, and that your
really.
thought,
I don't think that's
yeah.
true.
I don't think they're a hive mind.
No, I think like
Well,
I think they're. It's not that they're hive mind. It's that like their single purpose, like their entire
They're
purpose.
authoritarian.
It's more like they're driven by a single purpose of like getting off that planet. They all understand that this planet is like doomed, right? And so like they are
yes,
just
but
driven as a society to get off that planet, and they kind of agree and they communicate their thoughts instantaneously, but they don't speak with any kind of hive mind. I think
And I thought
they,
that was what was
yeah,
so interesting is like the reason or one of the reasons that the pacifist acted the way he did is because his life sucks. Like he lives in this little tower where he doesn't have to die during chaotic eras, but he doesn't get to go outside or enjoy or mate or like have any participation in a stable era at all. And so it's similar to Yun Tianming. Like he has really nothing to live for. So yeah, he's going to have euthanasia and kill himself, but it's
that's
not like he
interesting.
has much to live for.
That's an
That's sort of the
interesting
point.
explanation. Yeah, that's an interesting
Yeah.
explanation for why he would act out that way. By hive mind, I didn't mean that they communicate as a hive. I meant that they sort of like in a situation where you don't speak your thoughts, but your thoughts are just immediately conveyed to those around you, and words are not necessary. I got the sense, and maybe I'm visualizing it a little differently, is that if you don't have to use words to communicate your thoughts and the thoughts are just there, that generates a sense of less individuality because words are the medium through which you can communicate your thoughts. So you can actually say something that you don't mean, whereas the Trisolarans cannot say something that they don't mean because the thought as it is just conveyed automatically. So
They can
that is
say
what,
things that are just wrong and just stupid, though. Like the pacifist is
or that
talking to
you
the
disagree with.
princeps.
It's not even
Yeah,
like that's stupid. It's
absolutely.
just like not a shared opinion. It just happens
Not
to
a shared
be
opinion. He talks about like love and culture and like everything on Earth society. And he's like brimming with hope. And the princeps is like, yeah, there were civilizations like that. They ate it faster than anyone else. Like they're weak. They don't survive here on this planet. So they definitely like those two characters that we know so little about are at odds. And we also again see the pacifist saying, well, one of the reasons I did this is I get to meet the princeps now. Like maybe I'm dragged to the principal's office, but I get to have my life shine. You know, it looks, yeah, he did something which will set him apart. So I don't know. I do wish the Trisolarans were characterized a little bit more, but maybe we'll get more in season two.
yeah, I think this whole conversation kind of leads to that conclusion, which is that I, I believe that the character of Sophon in the books was introduced much later on as a character, right? So
yeah.
I think
She's like a
that
Yeah,
robot.
the
but it's
fact that
fine having her earlier. It's just what she chooses to do.
yeah, it's fine to have her earlier. I think like logically and narrative wise, it makes sense for the show to use her as the face for the Trisolarans, especially because, you know, in the book, you can have the Trisolarans talking to each other and describe scenes where they are talking to each other without giving away a description of what they look like and who they are. But for the purpose of the show, that would get much more convoluted to do. So That's why I think it makes sense for Sofan to come in earlier. But I think that also comes at the cost of what you get in the books, which is that you can have two members of the Santi talking to each other, and you can have that happen without ever finding out what they look like and what exactly they are. So I think that that's something that the show inevitably can't do.
Okay, well, we were talking about the Staircase project. Kind of went off course there a little bit. Anything more that you want to talk about there?
Just one example I had, like, I thought that the show did a better job in the book. Like, I liked how we saw Chengxin hear the requirements and sort of start to piece something together. Like, oh, well, if it needs to go 1% of light speed, well, what about like a solar sail type of like propulsion? And like they sort of bandy it around. And in the show, it's, I don't know, it's a rare example of the book being a lot less pompous, because in the show, Jin like struts in, like slams down a paper, and when she gets any opposition is like, that's on page 6, that's on page 8. And it feels a little bit less organic. Whereas in the book, it's really like, well, wait, is that even possible? I don't know. Let's find out. And lo and behold, it is. But if they had to shorten it, that's fine. I just thought it was a little pretentious.
But even in the book, like, it's not like, as with everything with the book, like the book has more color and more background and everything. And so like their first experiment, like the reason they decided to send a brain is because their experiment didn't work. Like they submitted a proposal to NASA or whoever,
Totally.
I think it was the PDC, and then and then NASA tried it, and then they said, oh, it didn't work. The experiment failed. So that's when Wade says, and they're all distraught, and they're all like, oh, what are we gonna do now? I guess we just give up. And they're like, Wade's like, nope, we're gonna send just a brain.
Advance.
So the actual quote is he just says like, we'll send only a brain, which is, I think that's a mic drop moment there too. Which is because it's like, I don't know if it's mic drop, and it's not maybe mic drop moment, but it's like, it's a memorable quote on my mind of the early parts of book 3. I guess let's talk about the Wallfacers next. And so there's a big change between the show and the book here, where in the books we have the 4 Wallfacers, 3 and then Luoji, and here we only have 2 other Wallfacers plus Saul. So we have Ho Valun, who is a military strategist, and then Layla Erich, who is supposed to be good at asymmetrical warfare. So I'm guessing, just based off of those descriptions and no other information, that we're not going to get Heinz's plan because there's no really analog to him. I think it's okay, because that plot doesn't go anywhere anyway. Like, it kind of, I don't know, like,
it's
I guess
fine without it. That's fine.
Yeah, the Zhang Beihai stuff, like, it kind of factors in with the mental seal. And
it's a long-winded way to allow Zhang Beihai to have the position of power that he has.
Right. But like, I think like this, Wade just saying like, oh yeah, you can run the Space Force on the moon. It's like, okay, done. Like we got the point, right? Like, Raj is gonna lead the fleet, right? And he's already talking about war and like and fighting the war, and he's gonna be a triumphalist, and we'll see if it transitions over to him actually being what was it, the defeatist, or what did they call it? They're the triumphalists and the escapists, and the people who are convinced that like that we're gonna lose the war against the Tri-Slinger, because like he is actually like one of those, right? So we'll see like if we get any hints of that later on, or if it doesn't matter, because like the whole like mental seal plot is confusing anyway, and then just like people just forget about it after Zhang Beihai. I thought it would come back, but it never does. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I guess, are you guys in agreement that like we're just not going to see Heinz's plan? I mean, that based off of like the slight information that we saw, like that's my assumption. And it's also kind of sad we're not going to see the Heinz's wife. What was her name? Keiko, right?
Keiko Yamasuki. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to see her turn as the wall.
Yeah, I do like the little betrayal. Like, that's why I wonder if we're going to get some other wall breakers besides Tatiana.
I mean,
we'll see.
Tatiana's definitely gonna be a wall breaker, right? Like I'm
Yeah,
guessing
for
that's why.
sure.
That's why at the end of seven, I think it's 7 or 8, or was it 8, where she puts the headset on. Um, yeah, I'm guessing like that's because like in the book, like the wall breakers all meet up in the VR game, right? Like the remnants of the ETO meet up and like discuss their plans. And so I'm guessing that's why Tatiana put it on, and she's gonna be the wall breaker. Uh,
I do think that it kind of possibly sets the stage between our main character and Tatiana, who's kind of like the main character representing the ETO's efforts. So I do feel, even though the idea is that Luigi is his own wall breaker, I think that they might pit Tatiana up against Saul.
yeah, I can see it. Yeah, I mean, I would if I were just betting, like I'm guessing that she's gonna be the wall breaker for all of them. Uh,
Yeah, that could work too.
yeah.
I don't think we're gonna get anyone choked to death. Uh,
I hope there are no conspiracy theories that pan out for Tatiana, because I honestly like, because there's so much like cryptic, like weird, mysterious stuff about her going on. Like there is a scene where Wenjie mentions to her right before she comes to kill her, "Do you know why the Santi sent you to me?" And there's never. She says she doesn't know, but there seemed to be like more there that she was like maybe like hinting at or like creating suspense over. So I think that something they're gonna do more with her character, but I hope that it's not something that again pulls us out of the spirit of the type of sci-fi we're dealing with in this series.
So when Tatiana gets the message from Sofan saying they need her for something right before she goes to Red Coast, the Sofan says, "We know exactly what you are. You're part of us, and we need you." And yeah, it does seem very cryptic, and that it's just more than she's just part of the ETO. Like I don't know. I'm still convinced that like there's something more there than her just being a fanatic.
yeah, hopefully we get some answers on her.
I'm sure we will. Like yeah, I have faith in that they'll do it.
Some satisfying answers on her.
That I don't know. Like that's what I'm a little
No
more concerned with,
promises.
right? Like I mean, I hope
I'm
it
sure
doesn't.
we'll get some kind of answer. Yeah.
I hope it doesn't turn out she's like, oh, she's actually like a Santi who came to Earth, like
Oh my
forever
gosh.
ago. Like that would be terrible.
Collective groan. I'll stop
Yeah.
telling people to watch.
Right.
This is where Talia and I are completely aligned. Where
Oh,
For
same.
once, we're on the same page.
I know we may differ on Will, but we do not differ on the fact that we want them to remain true to what the again, like the book never calls them Santi, right? That's why I keep wanting to call them Trisolarans. Like
I
I
call
Well,
them either on
the
this
English
podcast, I'm sure.
the English translation doesn't, but like the original Chinese text does. That's
so
The
the
original
Chinese
book is
text
called
does call them-
Santi. It's not even called Three Body Problem. It's just called Three Body.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Santi is just like 3 body. Like San is like 3, and then T is body.
Ooh, look at you flex your Chinese, Dan. Yeah.
Yeah, with my terrible pronunciation. But
Okay, all right. So that's probably why I don't. This was my first time hearing the term in the show, but anyway, I want them to remain true to what they can and cannot do, like what their capacity is.
Yeah.
And I think that it helps to maintain that loyalty to the book on that ground, because then you get to see how they evolve, almost like not evolve, but like they definitely develop like a greater capacity to do more stuff over time, even from a distance. So I think that keeping them at least within the scope of the books that we're dealing with, keeping them limited to what the book says they can do is pretty helpful to the plot. So
yeah, I think like one of the cooler reveals of the book is like when we get the reveal of like how all these miracles are happening, right? And like the fact that like it can't just be 2 protons that are like blocking all the science, and imprinting images on people's retinas, and just like it's just like these two protons that came at light speed. Like just the fact that it can do all those things like with such limited, like resources, and like
the idea that they're the
yeah.
same size as a fundamental particle and can interact
Yeah.
with other fundamental particles in a particle accelerator just seems so much more grounded in reality than hallucinations of a woman speaking to you. Right? Like, I understand that it's not pure science, but there's an effort to make it seem like hard science. So we'll see.
Yeah. I'll give, after the season, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They do seem a little bit OP, but well, we'll see.
I would like to, just maybe at the end, give this season like an entire letter grade. I'm curious to see what you guys would award it.
Yeah, I think we'll get there, because I have a couple of wrap-up questions as well. But any more things you want to talk about with the Wallfacers? I thought it was cool that they kept the Wallfacer smile. That was like a theme. That was like a cool idea of like when the Wallfacer said something, and even though they don't believe it, they're like, okay, sure, I get it. You're making some plan, and you're not telling us the truth. And that was like, Dasher had that, and the interaction between him and Big Head there was good.
You can read the quote from the book, but yes, I loved seeing Big Head doing the Wallfacer smile. He nailed it.
Yeah, I don't think we need to read the whole quote, but just the Wallfacer thing, the Wallfacer smile is a thing in the book, and they portrayed it really well on the screen. I thought it was great.
Yet again, showing they are true to the book, and they have, well, not true, but they have a lot of reverence for the book.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think they get it, right? Like, and that's why, like, going back to our belabored point of the OP Sophons, like, I think they're going to, maybe they kind of went overboard this season, but I think, like, given a season 2, they'll make adjustments and they'll understand the spirit of the book, right? Like,
and I'm willing to give them that chance. I will definitely tune in for season 2, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think 4 seasons would be the perfect amount of time to tell this whole story.
Yeah, I think 4,
like the pace that we're going. Yeah.
If it's 8 episode seasons, or then I think 4 would be.
Yeah.
It's just because like Death End's like so big, and there's so much time happens. Like, it depends how much they get rid of it. Also,
the last like 2 chapters of Death's End are like an entire season by themselves.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Can you imagine some of the scenes from Death's End playing out on screen? One of my favorite things about the way that they've been portraying the visual aspects of things from the book is when they put a visual to the scientific aspect of things. That is the part that fills me with the most awe, because when reading like hard science, I have trouble visualizing what's being described a lot of the times. Like, we opened up a proton, we built a computer, then we wrapped it back up. I'm like, what? Like, I can't visualize this. And
the particle accelerator, I found, like, in the beginning of the show was so flat. Like, they kept showing these screens of like, can you believe the universe looks like this? And I'm like, squiggles? Like, is it supposed to look different? Like, what is it supposed to be? But if they can show like the circumsolar particle accelerator, like imagine the Hadron Collider, but built around the sun. Like, if they can show creating a black hole with that, if they can show all these scientific things, I'm with you, Priya. Like, if they can make that dense stuff visually exciting.
I have 3 things. So like, I have 3 scenes that I'm really, really dying to see. So
let's hear them.
So the 3 from the book that I'm dying to see is, one, when the scene where Eloji figures it out. That is described so beautifully in the book.
His cold plunge?
Yes, his cold plunge. Yes, that's what you reduced it to, Talia. But
tongue in cheek, that was beautiful. 100%.
It was beautiful. He's looking up at the stars, and then the reality of the stars becomes apparent to him. It was where you see, because I think there was like a note by Lucy Shin, and at the end of, like, I don't know which of the books, but for him, he describes that like math and science and like physics and chemistry and all of that, these are poetic concepts to him. So when he writes about them, he wants to do them justice and write poetically about them. And I think that those are the moments where he really succeeds at doing that. And that as someone who isn't great at math and therefore sucks also at anything related to physics, and a lot of chemistry, I have this like reverence for science, but the math always gets in the way for me and always got in the way throughout my educational career. Um, I really appreciate that because to me, always anything scientific always seemed very poetic in a sense, but the math always obscured it from my from my grasp. And so when an author succeeds at bridging that gap between that which is literary and poetic and that which is cold, hard science, I think that I have a very deep appreciation for that. So I want to see how that scene and scenes like that would be portrayed on the screen. And then the other scene that I'm dying to see is, of course, how in scene form will they do the fairy tales? That will require a very creative touch, and I think that they are fully capable of providing us with that based off what we've seen in season 1 so far. So that will be fun. And then finally, of course, the finale of Death's End and what happens to our solar system.
Yeah.
That is something that will be a real challenge to depict on screen, and it could look really, really campy, or it could look really amazing. So
I hope they include Van Gogh. I was just thinking about how much I enjoyed the fate of the solar system, and I think it could be done so well on screen. So
oh, and I have a fourth. The ring scene.
Go.
How could I forget the ring?
The ring. Oh no, that's not possible. You're setting them up to fail.
Yeah.
They can't do it, but we shall see. We shall see whether they do it well or not.
I mean, you're forgetting Wenjie getting tried to murder by the couch. Like that's the pivotal scene for season 2.
Dan and I will both boycott if it's not.
And Logie getting violently sick. Saul getting violently sick.
If there's not 4K footage of him almost falling down a manhole, that's it.
And drinking really, really old wine. Was it like shipwreck wine and getting violently sick?
Oh my gosh. Also, yeah, so small punctilio. People are like complaining that Saul like smokes weed and seems like a little bit of a slacker. I have my own reasons on why I think they have that particular criticism for that particular character. But did they read the book? Because that's like his whole MO.
Right.
Casual drinking, casual hedonism, import a waifu, whatever you feel about that part of the book. He does choose to do it, and he does like indulge in a lot of his preferences. He even says to Secretary General Say, like, why did you pick me? Like, I know I'm a professor, but like I'm not a genius. I just use grant money to like keep going. Like I'm not even serious about my research. And even when he has these questions about how to send a spell to a star, he calls an actual scientist and is like, I used to do a little bit of astronomy, but I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, help me understand how to do this. It's very true to the character. So
yeah,
people complaining about that, check yourselves.
People just want to complain because he's not Chinese, right? But like, who cares? Like we care more about his motivations than like, his story and like what he does.
I think Priya cares the most that Luo Ji is done with justice and has very little to do with him being Chinese.
He is my favorite character of the entire book. But now I think the Will Downing representation of Yuan Tianming is my favorite character in the book. But I think that I found him so compelling because he's kind of like an anti-hero. He's not interested in solving anything, and then he comes to experience character development, and that's what enables him to figure this whole thing out. And I always find the characters intriguing who display character development. So and then there's also the fact that he's super cool at the end of his story arc where he's kind of like just his whole life is just sitting in a
Oh
room
yeah, he's a legend at the
holding a
end.
button.
But I
He's
think like
so cool at the end.
yeah, like Saul is already kind of showing like his prowess to this position, right? Because like when he's on the beach with Jin, like, and he's trying to think about like, why was I chosen? And then he kind of like figures it out like a little bit, but he doesn't say it because now he understands he's a Wallfacer, right? He's like,
Yeah,
nah,
I noticed
stupid.
that too. He like
Yeah,
catches himself already
yeah,
acting a bit like a wallfacer.
yeah. So
I
it's
really
cool.
hope he
He's
demands
growing.
a mansion to live in and we get to see it, but we'll see.
Yeah. I want to, speaking of Saul and his relationships, I want to speak with about a little bit about Wenjie and particularly their interaction between Wenjie and Saul. When we talk about the joke, I think a good Easter egg and another point of reverence towards the book is that they have the ant crawling on the gravestone of her daughter, which is great. That's a really nice book reference there. When I saw it, it was the Leonardo DiCaprio meme, like pointing at the screen, right? Like we like definitely all recognize it as book readers. But yeah, like I think like the way that they set up her kind of understanding, her praying to her Lord before saying like, oh, when you come, like, there might be a fair fight and it might not be a fight at all. That's really set up, and then but right before she meets him, she's reading books on game theory and Fermi's paradox. So book readers will know that like this is all built off of the idea of cosmic sociology and like the two axioms of cosmic sociology. So I pulled a quote. It's long, but I think it's important to kind of go over it again so we all kind of refreshed. So bear with me as I as I read through it. So this is again Wenjie and Luoji speaking in the graveyard, saying, first, survival is a primary need of a civilization. Second, civilization continuously grows and expands, but the total matter in the universe remains constant. Those two axioms are solid enough from a sociological perspective, but you rattle them off so quickly, like you've already worked them out, Luoji said, a little surprised. I've been thinking about this for most of my life, but I've never spoken about it with anyone. I really don't know why. One more thing. To derive a basic picture of cosmic sociology from these two axioms, you need two other important concepts: chains of suspicion and technological explosion. Interesting terms. Can you explain them? Wenjie glanced at her watch. There's no time, but you're clever enough to figure them out. Use those two axioms as a starting point for your discipline, and you might end up becoming the Euclid of cosmic sociology. So, yeah, there's a long setup and a more. It's still cryptic, but like not anywhere as cryptic as the joke. But again, like I think I said before, like I really appreciate them adding more, more things for the audience to kind of decipher and think about. Like that's not so obvious, right? So like us book readers will know like where he's going to and like what he's going to figure out as the Wallfacer. But show watchers will have not known that, and they will spend a bunch of time thinking about like what he actually means, which I think is great. Like I think I said last time, like one of my favorite shows of all time is Lost, and like kind of deciphering like cryptic phrases, then trying to like decipher like what that means is great. I love doing it. I kind of wish I didn't know the books just so I could decipher it myself, but it's it's good in both ways. Yeah, so I spoke for a long time, but I just wanted to appreciate that part of it, like especially that interaction. I think because like it's going to set up a lot. It's basically like the setup, one of the most important things about the show going forward into season 2 and beyond.
I've had a question actually, for a long time about this interaction between Wenjie and Saul slash Loji. Is that did she know exactly what information she was trying to relay to Saul slash Loji? Did she have Dark Forest theory figured out in her head, but
I
couldn't
think she
say it?
does.
Yeah.
But then
I think this old lady knows exactly what's up.
right. So why is it that she couldn't just say it? Because once Saul figures it out, he's going to obviously reveal this to the world. So why couldn't she just reveal it.
I think she knows that the Sophons are listening to her, right? And so she
Right.
also doesn't want to get him in trouble, right? Like she
But
does.
the Sophons are listening even when Luoji reveals it in the book, right? What exactly does he do when he figures it out? He reveals it, and then
He goes into
Well,
hiding.
well, he casts a spell, right, to test it, right? When he
He
figures it
leaves
out.
his Eden and goes into hiding to,
Well, no, he casts a spell and then he goes in hibernation to see and tells them like, wake me up when it works.
So
Yeah.
basically so Ye Wenjie doesn't reveal it herself because she has not proved it, and he needs to prove it for the world to believe it.
I think he needs
Because
to
the
prove it to
world,
himself, right? To make
yeah, to
sure, like,
himself.
yeah,
Because
he's
there's
more
some people
like,
on Earth who are never convinced, right? Like they don't believe in deterrence. They don't believe in dark forest theory. They think the Trisolarans ran away for some other reason. But yeah, Dan's right. Prove it to himself.
but yeah, and once he
Okay.
does, then he goes, all right, now I know a way to keep the Trisolarans at bay, which is the deterrence era, right? Like, all right, I
I
just
think
showed you, I just proved to myself I can blow up someone's gonna blow up this planet because I broadcast the coordinates and someone blew it up with a photoid, right?
he who
So
has power to destroy a thing has ultimate control of the thing.
yeah,
Bring some Frank Herbert Dune back into remembrance of Earth's past. I think that, I mean, it's a fair question. Like in the book, they are just protons. Like, what are they going to do? Like, make her see things, hit her on the arm? Like, there's nothing to really fear. But I think it's a more existential fear that drives Ye Wenjie. That's my guess. Like
but she knows
when
the ETO is still around. Like I mean, she has to like a lot. Obviously, like they got brought down by the
she
raid,
knows
but
they're
she
around.
yeah she knows more people around, and like they still have resources, and they could still get to her and him. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, via like the sofa, the Trisolarans could tell them to get them, which they do, right? That's exactly what they do.
I
Uh,
wondered if it was just an existential fear of deterrence itself. Like when the sword holder destruction scene happens after the changeover and all those all the everything is destroyed, they have like a post-mortem and figure out why their plan didn't work. And she was Chung Sheen says that they humanity had a chance to build a deterrent system that couldn't have been destroyed by the droplets. They should have sent a ship out into space, but they don't because they're afraid of the dark forest. Like I think Ye Wenjie is afraid, as she should be, of what she's revealing. Like she's doing it anyway, cryptically, but she's
and
afraid.
and her whole life has like been wanting them to come here and take us over. It's not until like her last moments
Yeah,
that she has a change of heart, right?
but we may never know.
Yeah. And speaking of our last moments in life, like I guess like one thing that was always unclear to me is at the end of book one, if she actually dies. Like here it's explicit, right? Like in the show, like she was in the jump and then Tatiana comes and kills her, and then like in the next episode, like Dasher says, "Oh, she was murdered," right? But at the end of book one, to me, it was always more ambiguous. Like
It is
and maybe
ambiguous, yeah.
yeah. So I'm gonna read the quote again. Bear with me. It's long, but I think it's interesting. So it says, "This is end of book one. To provide a problem. Yeah, walked to the lip of the cliff. Here, she once had ended the lives of two soldiers with her own hands. She did not look over the sea of clouds as the others were doing. She focused her gaze in one direction. Below the clouds, there was a small village called Chijatun. Ye's heart beat with effort, like a string on some musical instrument about to break. Black fog appeared before her eyes. She used the last bit of her strength to stay upright. Before everything sank into darkness, she wanted to see sunset at Red Coast Base one more time. Over the western horizon, the sun that was slowly sinking into the sea of clouds seemed to melt. The ruddy sun dissolved into the clouds and spread over the sky, illuminating a large patch in magnificent bloody red. My sunset, yeah, whispered, and sunset for humanity. So I don't know. Like to me, like she didn't kill herself there. Like that's not the impression that I got. Like she had no intention of going there to kill herself. She might have died because she was old or whatever, but I never got the sense that she was going there to kill herself. But rereading it, maybe I can see that open interpretation. So I'm interested to hear what when you guys read it. Like, what did you think that she had died there? Did you think that she had killed herself? Do you think that like what was your interpretation of it?
My interpretation of it was that I have forgotten that scene from the book.
How can you forget
Yeah,
it?
that's my interpretation.
How could you forget it? It's so pivotal. Like the speaking of like things that I miss from the books and the show is like the quote of like my sunset and sunset for humanity. I think that's like such a
Well,
great
that's
quote.
because you've read the books like multiple times, Dan, and I have not had that experience yet.
But
And
that's
mine is because I have read it multiple times. I'm just slow. I remember a lot of like sunset motif, but I don't remember when it happened in her life. But this is why we are a dream team of three.
yeah, that's surprising. Like actually, like that. That's not such a like a like that's up there for me. Like Wilson only a brain and like the quotes of in like Luo Ji, I'm your wall breaker. Like when he realizes that those and then Yun Tian Ming he has a message for you and that kind of stuff. Like that it's this quote is
People
like up
have
there.
different things that stand out to them. I
Yeah,
was just
that's why it's
chatting about
surprising.
this with a fellow book reader. My gosh, not that that's a title. I just meant someone who's watched it and also read the books. Fellow book reader. And he was saying that there are sentences at the end of Cixin Liu's passages that really just speak so powerfully and so poignantly. And I'm nodding along, and he's like right at the end of the first chapter of book one, it's just so clear. Like, this is what we're doing to academics. Academics are being targeted and destroyed, and we are rotting from within. And this is so clear. And I was like, I don't remember that at all. But I love that you do. And I got that impression from the book overall, but like some people see it in those powerful sentences.
Yeah.
Sorry that Priya and I do not have more impactful
No,
things to say.
it's interesting that like it's not like I just assumed that was like as impactful to everybody as it was to me, but I guess not.
I will say this though, is that for me, Ye Wenjie's character was only interesting up until the point where she has that conversation with Luo Ji in the books. And I think that that was the only thing that she did other than the reveal that she's kind of like at the head of the ETO. And then after that, like she gets arrested, obviously. And then she has the conversation with Luo Ji. But then the whole time I was wondering if there is evidence that she has like doomed all of humanity, how is it that they just kind of like let her go? Let's just
Yeah.
let her reintegrate into society. Like that is a special kind of crime, right? To betray all of humanity and bring this disaster upon humans. And
Don't they say in the show that like they don't have a crime to actually put on her? Like
right, because such a crime has never been committed
Has
before
never
that
been committed.
right.
Yeah.
I mean
exactly.
that's a theme
So
throughout the books, right? There's like all these like
right.
crimes against humanity, like just like various
All the
people doing.
time. Do you remember
Yeah.
when Bronze Age is being court-martialed? And they're like, what about the presumption of innocence? And like, that doesn't count for you. This is a
Right.
crime against humanity.
And all the Wallfacers have crimes against humanity, especially Diaz, right?
Reminds me of
Right.
another Dan Harmon piece, Rick and Morty, where Rick says like, well, you have what we would call a very planetary mindset. It's just like the whole universe is spinning with such big problems, and humans are here arguing about whether or not this should be considered a particular kind of crime or not. I don't know. It's a very funny scale.
Yeah, so I felt like that was my big gripe because I was like, "Oh, how are you not gonna at least like keep her in prison because what if she like she's clearly shown it's almost like if you are working for a terrorist organization because I guess in this case whoever is working against all of humanity is akin to a terrorist organization. How are you going to just let her go back out there and probably really herself with them and
Yeah.
work further to the detriment of humanity because no one knows at that point that she has experienced a change of heart upon understanding that the Santi aren't actually coming here to improve our lives. They're coming here to enslave and eradicate most of us. So yeah, that was my big question about Wenjie. So I kind of like, I was like, oh, well, okay, her character's just still here for the whole purpose of having this conversation with Loji and kind of cluing him in to like what the reality of the universe is. So I didn't really fixate on her character beyond those ideas that I had around it.
So I wouldn't say it's an afterthought, but like, I mean, that conversation happens in the book too, right? So it's, I don't know if he thought about that at the time. Afterthought seems like a little bit dismissive. Like he probably had that idea in mind of cosmic sociology and that kind of stuff. But I mean, it definitely wasn't part of her character arc in book one. I think in the show, it's like maybe like a little bit more shown like why they let her go is that they wanted to surveil her, and see what she does. And they also don't have a crime to charge her with. But I think like, they have the guy going with her and they, kind of trying to surreptitiously watches her and then like she realizes what's going on. And so he becomes like more of her bodyguard. That didn't do a very good job apparently. But I think like the reason that Wade approved letting her go is that he wanted to surveil her and see what she did. Okay, I think like let's move on to the next section, which is we have foreshadowing. There's a couple different things that are going to be important later on. We have Will and his fishbowl that he names Pushkin after the 19th century Russian fairy tale of the tale of the fisherman and the fish. And the fish grants wishes. Lots of fishbowl imagery in the book. Yes, lots of, Jin gives him the fishbowl. He carries it around with him to the hospital, but even before that's the last thing he looks at before he dies. So I think it's confirmed fishbowl at the end of the series.
I hope we get the fishbowl that Guan Yifen carries as well.
I don't remember that.
Guan Yifen carries a biological spear, and he gives it to the ring.
Oh, man.
Man, you and I need to chop it up about the ring section. Like, it's my favorite section.
The ring still that whole section still confuses me. Like
yeah, we'll talk offline.
the ring is also up there in my like top 5, I would say. Yeah,
100%. Anyway, foreshadowing. What did you see, Priya?
Oh, it just occurred to me. There are references to fish in the conversation that the ring has as well.
Yeah, it
the ring talks about fish. Yeah,
that's how it gets on. That's how it gets on the topic. So it's like the fish who dried the sea went on land. Oh, you actually have fish. Yeah,
yeah. So the fish imagery is going to carry over, and I think that it felt like Will's character was like they pinned all the little Easter eggs and then all the foreshadowing onto Will.
He does have to hold all of that on his shoulders. That's right.
Yes, on top of everything else he has to deal with.
Hold this too. Yeah.
Well, we also have Dashir's son, Reg, in the show, and Xiaoming in the books, setting up his escapism plan and kind of setting up the idea of escapism in general. In the book, it's more complicated and long, and I'm glad they kind of condensed it. That was always one of my least favorite parts of Dark Forest, was like just like the random old Chinese people who show up and then go away.
Oh, they will not be missed.
Yeah.
I understand that they're meant to like track the passage of time and be ordinary people and talk about escapism, but if they can get it across with this kid and an iPad, they will not be missed.
Now I remember those old people.
Right?
Yeah.
A flashback to...
And not only, like, the crime is not only do we have to listen to all the old people, we get backstories on the old people about like the old person's mistress who doesn't appear on screen.
Yeah.
And my God.
She's from Sichuan. I'm like, we can skip all of this.
Yeah, it's all just a setup that Dashir's son goes to prison.
Like, that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Oh wow, I remember all of this now. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. It comes back like a fever dream.
But I mean, it's interesting they're setting it up. They're kind of setting up the idea of escapism, and then like his son also kind of taking shortcuts, and Dashir calling it out as bollocks, right? And it's like I think it's good. It's good setting up story for future seasons. And one of the more interesting things is like Yeah, I think one of the more interesting thing is like when Dasher travels, like hibernates to the future, he becomes like the same age as his son, and like the interactions between them, like when he actually like when they meet back up in the future is pretty interesting. And then to tie it up to Augie, like her boss is the guy who's running the scam with Dasher's son, and they're setting up him to be kind of like the villain, I guess. And I think speaking of Augie, one thing I've noticed online is that she's becoming the new Changxin. So historically, there's been lots and lots and lots of hate for Changxin with a very specific segment of the population on Reddit. And ever since the show came out, Augie is definitely taking that that hate. I don't know. I don't. She's, uh, she's taking the role of Wang Miao here, which is not much of a character to start with. But I don't know. I don't think the hate is justified at all. Like, if people are like, oh, how could she's just crying all the time and drinking all the time and all this stuff. And I don't know. Like, I didn't have a problem with her character watching it. How about you guys? Is there any issues with her, or do you think the hate is justified?
She definitely wasn't my favorite character. I felt like my favorite characters probably like the ones that like read really well on screen, like are translated really well on screen. Probably Saul, Jin Chang, Will. We all know that I love Will by now. So
Yeah.
yeah, these characters, and then who else? I think Wade was really well portrayed, even though he's quite different from the book, it seems.
He's not as
Uh,
evil in the show.
right.
Not not
Not
yeah,
yet.
not
Not
yet.
yet.
Yeah.
And we discussed that okay, it's because Liam Cunningham is playing him. That's in part why, but I enjoy his quipping and his and the way his dialogue is written. Besides that, the other characters, I thought that, well, Augie kind of drops in and drops out, right? Halfway
Yeah.
through the show. So that could be why her character doesn't remain as compelling for us. Definitely more compelling than Wang Miao. So,
It's
I mean, we should be
not hard
thankful
to
for
do.
that.
She's not as creepy, like taking secret
Yeah.
photographs of Vera or something.
Well, he's taking creepy photographs. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, she's better than him, but not as good as the other characters, is what I would say.
Yeah, I guess let's just jump into just kind of like final thoughts around the season in general. I know Talia wanted to do a letter grade, but I first wanted to do is like I guess like, of the 8 episodes, like which one was your favorite? I think like it's the general sentiment I've seen is like episode 5, in ratings wise, and just seeing people talk about episode 5 as their favorite. But I guess like Talia, which would be your favorite of the 8 episodes?
I really, really can't emphasize how much I liked watching the staircase probe unfold. Like
Yeah.
it was so cool. I also like, as a New Yorker, love to see us like land at the UN building in Lower Manhattan, and like I don't know, I thought it really upped the ante in episode 8. It made me excited about the future, and I was watching with someone who hasn't read the books, and they were like making predictions, and I was like, oh, like it's piqued your interest. I see.
Okay. How about you, Priya?
I will refrain from naming a favorite episode. I think I had favorite scenes, not favorite episodes, but I think that that's a good sign because I think that that means that there weren't any episodes that were like weak, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, or there were no episodes that like really stood out so much more than other episodes. It means that it was a cohesive plot throughout.
Totally.
And I think that each episode gave us scenes that we could really appreciate, and I think that that is a mark of a show well executed.
How about you, Dan?
Me personally, I'm gonna go with episode 7 as being my favorite. All the stuff with Will and Saul and Will and Jin. That I mean, like the all that stuff was so good. And then like the setup to the Staircase project and some of my favorite scenes and the joke and the Wenjie at the end. I thought like obviously I like the whole season was great. But I think of all the episodes, like episode 7 is my favorite.
But
Which,
Priya reminds me that, like, the first episode, often the first several episodes of a new TV show have so much exposition to do, right? They
Yeah.
have to make us care about things and also explain things. And I think it's a mark of the strength of this show that it didn't really feel that heavy in the first episode. Like, we
Yeah.
jump in, we get this characterization so quickly. That's why I was like congratulating, like, I'm so glad we skipped Wong Mao going to the eye doctor. Like, they did a lot of really smart choices to make this a really cohesive show.
Yeah, I mean, they send the signal on the second episode, right? And like I mean, like people talk about the pacing and it's too fast, and they drop a lot of the plot lines. But those plot lines didn't need to be there, you know. Like, do we
Yeah,
need
get
to,
rid
do
of
we need,
them.
do we need to have whole season, like a whole episode of like Wenjie going and giving birth in a remote village? Yeah, it's okay. Like I'm okay with like not having that. I think the story is better for it. Where we ended up is better for it. Um, as far as like a letter grade for the entire season, I'm gonna go with an A for me personally. Only missing an A plus by Sophon's being OP. You know, tentatively, we'll see how they explain it. Sort of, yeah, like we've said, I agree in spirit. Like it kind of goes against the spirit of what the Sophons can do. So I'm interested to see how they kind of reconcile that with the rest of the lore and the story. But yeah, like it's better than the books in a lot of regards. I mean, obviously the books have a lot more color and a lot more world building, but this is a more cohesive, emotional story that I'm more invested in the characters in, where the books was about the concepts and the science. Both are cool, but I'm gonna go with an A for the season. How about you, Freya?
I will say one thing about the points that you made about, the plot lines that didn't need to be there. Things are very different in like written media versus visual media. So like what works in a written narrative is not necessarily what's going to work in a visual narrative. So you can expound upon so many things in a book. And yes, even for a book, some things can get tedious, like Wang Miao going to the eye doctor. But I think that a book is, reading is always like what I like to think of as like delayed gratification versus watching a show is instant gratification. And I think that these two forms of media are different for a reason, and that is why the experience of reading is very different from the experience of watching a show or a movie. So yeah, the differences between the two are going to always be there, and that's not necessarily because the book is too convoluted, but because just by their nature, shows and movies cannot be what books are, cannot take the liberties that books can. So that's my little nod to the book to say, hey, there are parts of the book that, yeah, we didn't need all those old people having a storyline. We didn't need Wong Miao going to the eye doctor, but still, there's something in the books that is worth spending extra time on. That said,
Even the old people plot, it's like there's interesting stuff that's happening underneath it.
yeah.
Like this, it's world building, telling him like it's over the story of like how the Earth is reacting to the knowledge of an alien civilization. It's like that the cold open to episode 6, right? Like it, all of that stuff is condensed into that one cold open, where in the book it's like the background of that whole story, which is interesting in itself. And like the books are worth reading, and there's a lot of like color that kind of builds into the story. Um,
And
we all love the books, so
I will say this is I have a fairly low to sometimes moderate tolerance for boring parts of books. Like if a book is boring me, I feel the effects of boredom quite quickly. And at no point while reading The Three Body Problem, not even book one, did I ever feel like, okay, boredom is hitting me in a way where I'm not sure if I want to continue with this book or not. So that really says a lot, because there are many books that I have just like trudged my way through where I have felt that, like, oh, okay, maybe I'll put this down now and I don't know if I want to come back to it. So I never felt that with these books. That being said, I would rate this show an A in a world where A+ exists in the grading system. But in a world where A+ does not exist in the grading system, I would still go with A. I would not demote to A-. And I think that if in a world where Will Downing's character didn't exist in the show, it would be a B+.
Not even an A-. Really?
Nope.
Not even an A-.
We would go a whole letter grade down if his character didn't exist.
I might agree with that. Yeah, I think it added so much to the story, and like the Oxford Five in general, I think added a lot to the story, like, and the interactions between them, and just thinking about like how that's going to pay off in the future. All right, Talia, how about you?
I thought it was a compelling and engrossing retelling of the three-body problem. I think it made a lot of really smart choices to adapt a written work. So I'm not going to be evaluating it as a version of the book. I'm going to evaluate it as a TV show based on a book. And I would solidly give it a high A-. Not for more reasons than the two of you have, but like for me, Dan, you gave the reason like the Sophons are OP'd. That's my only gripe. And to me, that just demotes it down to an A-, but it's not like I have more concerns that I think it's saved by the smart choices it does in characterization and the way it cuts through a lot of the slow parts of the book. Allowing things to happen concurrently is really exciting. Yeah, I don't think the pacing is ideal, but it's really just that I feel like there's a fundamental misunderstanding of the quote unquote enemy in the Sophons. So for me, it's a strong A-. Would recommend it.
At least you didn't say A- because of Will, at least.
I would never. I would never.
I agree. I agree with your premise in that case.
You're so cautious on agreeing with me. Yes.
So one final question is, where do we see episode or a season, if there's a season 2, hopefully there is, where do you see it ending? I personally see the droplet attack happening in episode 7. If it's 8 episodes again, I see the droplet attack happening in episode 7, and then and basically ending with the end of book 2, with Wenjie with a gun to his, or Saul with a gun to his head, talking to the Sophons and understanding his plan. So I think like Droplet is episode 7. The spell is episode 8. How about you? Is that how you guys see it? Maybe that's too simplistic in that, it's season 1, 2, and 3, but like that's kind of how I see it.
That'd be perfect. I would have no problem with that.
My dream is for them to pull elements of book 3 into season 2, which might be a little ambitious, but the plot, unfortunately, of 2 and 3 is no longer linear in my head.
Yeah, it happens too far. It happens past that, right? Because like the Wenjie like initially, like initiates deterrence, and then Changxing wakes up like way after that, already in the deterrence area.
Yeah, and I think that it's kind of hard to map out now at this point the show to the book in terms of timeline. So I really don't know how they're gonna pull it together.
I just would have no problem with the one that you said, Dan. Like I would be happy as a clam if that's how they chose to do it.
Yeah, I would go with. I mean, yours is a solid prediction.
I mean, I'm interested to see what they can figure out to do with Jin and Augie throughout the season, because they're not going to just put them in hibernation. They're not going to not have them for the entire. She's the main actress. Jin is the main actress of the show, right? They're not going to have her.
I had wondered if they were going to keep Augie for future.
I wondered that too. I wondered because I also feel like my impression of her would go up greatly if they just made her a complete character as someone who's worried about the now instead of the future, and they wrote her off into Mexico to fix the now. Like that would be very fulfilling. And if they pull her into future seasons, I'm like,
because she doesn't let herself get pulled back, right? She doesn't answer the call. But they keep showing this romance with Saul. I feel like we're gonna have her get pulled back somehow. It's over. It's over. He's a Wallfacer now, and she's in Mexico. It's
I
over.
sure hope so.
I don't know.
If I didn't, I felt nothing for their romance, by the way.
Yeah,
Nothing.
me neither.
I don't think
Me
you're supposed to
neither.
have, right? Like it's not it's kind of shown as like a like something that happened or maybe happened in the past, but
It's
like
like an anti-romance. Like
yeah.
it has all the elements of what should not exist between two
Yeah,
people.
my gripes about her character will fade to zero if she doesn't come back. It'll be fine. She's better than Wang Miao.
Yeah,
So-
out of sight, out of mind, right?
Exactly.
I don't think there's any world that's going to happen unless the show doesn't come back. Like she's definitely coming back for a potential season 2.
Yeah,
there's
Priya
no
and I
way.
are just hoping.
This is wishful thinking here.
Exactly.
These are our wishes for season 2 and beyond.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. We've been going for a while here, but thank you very much for listening to our season of Three Body Problem. We've really enjoyed talking about it, as we always do, and we always will inject it into any other thing that we talk about. We'll continue to do that, and we are still discussing what we're going to be doing for future seasons. And given the assumption that Three Body Problem's not coming back until 2026 at the earliest, we're not going to wait until then to decide what to do. So please check our social medias for what we're going to be doing. And please check out Rehydrate.space for release episodes, reading lists, pronunciation guides, and all the other stuff we put up there. Leave comments by emailing us at rehydrate@fastmail.com, on Twitter at RehydratePod, or on Mastodon at rehydrate@mass.to.